Today, I'm here to guide you through the best settings to start out when diving into the world of Final Fantasy for the first time. I understand that adjusting your settings can be a daunting task for newcomers, so I'm here to try to make this as easy as possible. I'll walk through all the settings, and you can pause the video at any time to see what settings that I have available and are making adjustments to your own game. However, please note that I'm not going over controller and hotbar settings specifically, just gameplay settings that'll make the world a little bit easier. Now, almost all the settings I'm going to be talking about are going to be under character configuration, so we're going to start out here. Under the general tab under controller settings, I highly suggest just starting out on legacy type movement. I think standard is on by default, but definitely start with legacy type and also hit disable camera pivot. And the reason you want to do this is so when you move forward on your stick, you physically go forward, and when you push right or left on your stick, you physically go left or right. If you do not disable camera pivot, you do this sort of like rounding curve motion when trying to move left or right. And I think it's just better to get used to true movement with the disabled camera pivot. The next one's pretty self-explanatory with cutscene skipping. This is just for playback cutscene skipping. So if you've seen it or if you haven't seen it at all, you will not skip it. This is just for playbacks of every single time you go into an instance, a cutscene will play. So if you don't want to turn that off, you can turn that off here. Now onto targeting, I just suggest have what I have on to start. I would say automatically facing target when using an action and disable targeting of pets and minions in battle. This just means you can really target enemies that you're trying to hit. And then automatic auto target due to priority and enable full auto target to closest range. This just makes it so if you're not physically targeting to an enemy, that when you use an action, you will automatically target the nearest enemy to you, and I suggest doing a cone to start. If you want, you can experiment with ignore to death. This aims at targets from left to right rather than in a cone facing outward from your character. Next, onto ground target settings. Limit ring movement to target range and press action twice to execute. For example, Ninja has a teleport that if you were to not have that setting checked, you could go outside of the range that'll allow you to target it or teleport to. So if you do not want to have to worry about that, this will always just keep you within the range that you're allowed to use this ability in. Now, target display settings, I just have everything highlighted here, and for filter settings, I have all enemies, duty-specific enemies, aggroed enemies, and NPCs and objects. This just makes it so you can't accidentally target something. Under filters, the left side, I just have everything targeted. So this basically means when you're not in combat and when you have your weapon drawn, you can only target enemies, aggroed enemies, duty-specific enemies, and NPC options. That's just how I have it set up. You can play around with this, but I think this is a good starting point. Now under character, we're going to focus under battle effect settings. This is what I suggest of showing all of your own and limited for everyone else. If you want to see none of any other else's abilities, just click show none. This might improve FPS, but I suggest doing show limited on everything. Under item settings, I suggest doing open all. This just allows you to see everything that is in your inventory at a given time rather than having to sort through tabs. Item categorization and sorting, this just shows how you want to have everything sorted. And for sorting method, I just suggest putting sort items into section based on category. This just means when you sort in your inventory, it'll group items together based off of if all the food are together, they're all going to be together. All the materials are going to be together. All of your crafting mats or your weapons will be together. And that's just how I would do it. Under UI settings, I'm not going to talk about it too much, but I'll just scroll through this tab slowly so you can see everything that I have enabled. I don't see a bunch of stuff on here. I do unclick the open upon login player guide. I unclicked all of this because I don't need to know. If this is annoying you every single time you log into the game, this is where you unclick it to not ever see it again. On the HUD layout section, this is also what I have. I would suggest having all of these clicked. I removed the display inventory grid because I don't actually like seeing it, but everything else I think is worth seeing. If you don't want to see the clocks that I have in the top right, you can unclick that here. This is just basically how busy do you want to have your HUD out display. I just suggest having almost everything clicked and remove what you want. For new players, definitely keep display main scenario guide on because this will show you where your next main quest is going to be. Now onto the party list. This is probably the only thing you have to really worry about in this section is going to be this number here. I like 7. This allows you to see how many buffs that are on your character or your party list at a single given time. And you can go all the way up to 10. I think it's a little busy. I stop at 7. It's default at 5. I suggest increasing it from 5, but it's up to you. You can play around with this. And then party role settings. I just have it set up like this. You find out what works for you, and all this is saying is when you're playing a tank role, when you're in a party, tanks are going to be prioritized at the top, then healers, then DPS. When you're a healer, tanks are going to be prioritized at the top, then healers, then DPS. And I have it set up as a DPS, then DPS are prioritized at the top, then tanks, then healers. Most people just take tanks, healers, and DPS as priority, so this is where you change that setting. Maybe the best to stick with the default of tank, healers, and DPS. Now on the only hotbar portion that I'm going to be talking about in this video is the display and the sharing and the cross hotbar. Display recast timer, I suggest putting this as centered, so when you click on ability you get a number in the middle of it so you know how many seconds until it comes back off of cooldown. That's what display recast timers are, and this is what the centered means. I just suggest starting out with that. You can put it in the bottom left of that box, but I think it's just better to have it in center. Hide unassigned slots. This will just clear up some of your UI, and then under the rest of this is just how you kind of want to have laid out. You don't have to worry about a lot of this if you're on controller, but sharing is the most important part, and this just means that any box that you have clicked is shared between all of your classes. So make sure that you have 1 and 2. I like having 3 unchecked also, but for sure make sure you have 1 and 2 unchecked. Otherwise all of your classes and jobs will share all of the same hotbars. So for me, for instance, regardless of what class I'm on, hotbars 4 through 8 share all of the same buttons through them, and then 1, 2, and 3 do not. So if you can see here, my hotbars for 1 and 2 are different than my hotbars for 1 and 2. But if I go to 4, they all look like this, and then if I go to a different class and go to 4, it all also looks like this. It's very evident when you can see my hotbars for 5, 6, 7, and 8 are lots of just emotes and switching between roles, and that's just because whenever I'm on any job, I want to be able to switch to any job that I want. So that's why I have it set up like that. But yeah, I think from there, that's a very good starting point for all of your settings, just to make the game a lot smoother and a lot easier to play. I know settings was one of the most difficult things for me starting out, so this is my suggested settings for new players. I hope you found it helpful. If anyone else has tips for new players for their setting guides, definitely put it down in the comments below. Help out a lot of the new players that are coming to join Final Fantasy for the first time. And as always, I hope you have a great day.